All right, ladies and gentlemen, hope you can hear me. A lot of folks still coming in. So welcome to my talk. It's called Scrum Patterns, a gentle introduction. So Scrum Patterns is about a book we wrote the last 10 years. It took 10 years to write, and I want to share some insights we got from writing that book. But before we start with the Scrum Patterns, and people are still walking in, I want to share why I am wearing this shirt. Who likes this shirt? You like it? Wow, okay. This is a football shirt from Ajax, which is a football club in Amsterdam. And I must admit, it's on camera, but it's true, I don't really like Ajax very much. And I also don't like this t-shirt very much. But I lost a bet to this gentleman there. Oh, he's called Joanne, and his name is on the back of this shirt. And the bet was if it was about football, of course, and I lost. And I had to wear this shirt at this specific conference. So I would have been here last year, but something happened with the plane, so I could not make it. So I'm wearing it now. But it's not enough. I also have to make a picture to prove that I had it. So I'm going to use 1 second of your time to make a picture with me and you guys at the back, so that he knows it is really true. All right. So that's this guy. And he said to me, his parents are Chinese, and he said to me, you should never make a bet with the Chinese, because you always lose. All right. So let's go to the patterns. This is me. I'm from 74. That's a lot of stuff. The most important thing is the book we wrote. It just published the paper version in September, which is this month. So people are still coming in, so that's okay. For me, just to learn about you guys, this is a bit of a rhetorical question, but just to understand. Who of you is working as a Scrum Master, Agile coach, or anything like that? That's good. And who of you are having problems implementing Scrum? All right, so that's good. So I'm not the only one. That's good to hear, good to know. So I have these problems too, and I work worldwide with organizations. And one particular company, a big bank in Holland in this case, invited me to talk to them. This is some 5 years ago or something. And I was talking to the head of the Agile coaches. So there's a big bank, and this lady has more than 100 Agile coaches working for them. And she said, well, Cesario, you know what? We invented this way of working, and it works really well. It took us 5-6 years to do. And now what we want to do is we want this way of working, this best way of working, we want you to go to the other countries, like Belgium and Italy and Poland and what so on, where they have the branches. And then you roll out this best way of working across all these organizations. How about that? She asked me. And I said, well, I don't know, maybe it's not such a good idea to do that. Well, maybe they have different customers. Maybe they have different market dynamics. Maybe they have different problems that your solutions don't solve for them. And I also said, maybe if it works for you, that you're claiming that, maybe that's because the people in your organization, they actually took that journey from where they were 5 years ago to where they are now. And during that journey, they had to unlearn all kinds of things that they were doing and learn new lessons by solving one problem at a time. And one of the things that we call culture is lessons learned. We say, well, why do you do that? Well, that's just the way we do things here. Maybe you've heard that phrase before. Well, that's the way we do things here, are lessons learned. It's called culture. So if you want to really change from whatever you're doing to being agile, maybe they have to unlearn also their old habits and learn new lessons. So it doesn't make sense to approach and give them this new solution up front. But she didn't agree. She said, no, 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 this is the best solution. This is the best solution, and you should really do it. And I said, well, I don't believe it in that. And unfortunately, they of course went ahead. And this is a thing a lot of companies do. They have some people, maybe agile coaches, and they think they are found the best solution. And this then boils down to what I call spreadsheet or Excel spreadsheet adoption. Then there is these groups of people, agile coaches or scrum masters, and they have these Excel sheets. And in these Excel sheets are all these kinds of things. And then they go to the teams, to the leadership, to the structure, to the meetings, and they say, well, team, are you doing the Scrum, daily Scrum in the right way? Check. Are you having the same board as these guys and these guys? Check. Do you guys use the same tooling? Check. Does leadership have this OBEA wall with the right metrics that we thought up? Check, check, check. Or not, check, check, check. And then they will have these kinds of metrics. They can assess the teams. They can say, well, this team does more checkboxes than that team. And this department has more checkboxes than the other department. And you are a very bad team because you have less checkboxes than this team. Maybe we should give you, I don't know, some motivation to check more checkboxes. And then when you do this, of course they also have very nice graphs to do all of this. And if you do this, you can be one thing you can be absolutely sure about. The people who follow this process, if you have enough of an army actually to force this, they will not own this process. They will not own their process. And if they don't own their process, it's very unlikely that they will care enough to improve it. You see? So if you want people to own their process, you have to give them the opportunity to create their own process, because then they own it. And this will very likely not work. And furthermore, if you do this, it's just what the guy came up with 100 years ago. This gentleman is called Frederick Winslow Taylor. He invented scientific management. It's just the same thing. We have very smart people, or at least they claim they're very smart, and they will tell the not so smart people how to work. Because there's a best way, and this is it. Please follow the rules. And the goal then becomes to check the check boxes instead of improving the quality of life, instead of improving the value for the customer, the value of the product, the meaningfulness of the workplace. That all gets lost because we focus on check boxes. So this is a very big danger. So I don't recommend to do spreadsheet adoption, although lots of big companies do this. So what else? What can you then do instead of this spreadsheet adoption? So you probably know this guide. It's 12 or 13 pages. If you take off the first pages who are just introductions, and the last pages which are just thank you notes. These are the rules of Scrum. And as you might understand, Scrum is a framework. It's not a method, so it doesn't give you any steps to build a product, which a method would be. A method would say, well, if you follow all these steps, you will end up with a product, successful product. So Scrum just gives you a framework. That's why it's only 12 pages. And the only thing that Scrum does is it makes you aware of what's going on. We call it transparency. It makes it transparent what's going on. And then you can decide if you want to do something about it or not. But it doesn't give you any hints about what to do. So it's pretty embarrassing from that point of view. And this is where the patterns come in. So the Scrum Guide is like the rules of chess. It's very easy to learn the rules of chess. I don't think it's very hard. But knowing the rules of chess doesn't mean I'm a chess player. Like knowing the rules of Scrum doesn't mean you can actually play Scrum. So the patterns is what gives the tactics. It's what gives the specific solutions to specific problems that you might encounter following the Scrum framework. That's what patterns are, right? So a pattern and we wrote 96 of them in this book, is a proven collective experience. So what does this mean? This means that at least three of us, three of the authors, saw this problem independently of each other somewhere on the globe, and we solved it in a similar way. So if that happened at least 3 times, we say, wow, this is interesting. It happens all over the world 3 times. We saw a solution for it, and the solution is very similar. Let's take that, let's extract that. That's why it took 10 years, and write it down in this semi-academic form called patterns. And there's 96 of these patterns that you can use to actually fix problems that you encounter while you do Scrum. So these are the authors. So there are some very famous people in there, like Jeff Sutherland is one of the authors, and Mike Beadle, who passed away, unfortunately. And so most of us are practitioners, but there are also some academics, like professors, who participated in this. So the patterns are solutions to a problem in a specific context. So if you have that context and you have that problem, well, maybe the solution will work for you. Of course, we don't know exactly your context. That's why you guys have to work on that also. But in order for you to use the context and use your intelligence about how to specifically tailor a solution to you, a pattern comes with explanations. It tells you why things are the way they are, why this is a problem, and why this solution might be solvable. Why this solution might solve your problem. And why do we do this? It's a lot of why. Because if you understand the why, then it's much easier for you to tailor your specific solution, instead of just following the steps, because nobody knows what works in your company, because, well, only you do, because you work there. So for example, why is there the daily Scrum? Why is there Conway's Law? Why is there a Scrum Master? Why is there small teams? Why is that? Why is there a sprint, for example? So if you understand that, then you can much better tailor that solution. So let's look at an example. So this is a problem statement, a part of it. So it's about work in the sprint. Work in the sprint emerges. You probably don't know everything up front, so things can change. Okay, that's a problem. All right, so what are some whys in the problem? Well, if you only have 10 tasks, then there are 3 million and a whole lot more ways to order those tasks. Well, that's a problem. If you want to execute that, many ways to execute that. On the other hand, another why, well, planning is waste most of the time. So if you want to plan all of this, you might invest a lot of time planning, not recommended. So we don't want to plan too much. We cannot plan it because it's a lot of possible permutations. So what would be the solution? Well, the solution is, well, why don't you have a short event every day and replan the sprint? It fixes the problem and solves the why questions. And you probably know this as the daily Scrum. Which is a very simple pattern. You can see here the graphical representation of the daily Scrum, 3 old men looking at each other. It's the head picture. And you see also 2 pictures, is the before and the after picture. So before you apply the pattern, well, then probably chances are that the boat will not hit where it wants to go. And after you apply the pattern, that's the bottom picture, depicts, well, maybe chances are higher now that you will actually get where you want to be because of this daily Scrum. So what is the Scrum pattern? So it's a problem, a solution to a problem in a specific context. But not only that, it also builds something. Every time you apply a pattern, you either build something in your organization or you build something in your value stream. Those are the 2 holes in Scrum. So you actually change your organization. You can actually observe in your organization the results it made. And also, a pattern does not stand alone. So a pattern is part of a pattern language. I will give you an example in a few seconds. So after you apply a pattern, darn, you solved one problem, but now there are many new problems that you can fix, that you can work on. And hopefully there are new patterns that you can use to fix those problems. But when you fix those problems, there are new problems again. And this keeps continuing until, until you get tired, probably. So this is a picture of us working on the book. This is maybe 5 years ago. This is in Denmark. And the guy with the glasses is Neil Harrison. He's a professor in some university in United States. And what he has in his hands are cards, pattern cards. And these are patterns that we found that I have to do with building high-performing teams. By building teams that actually are effective. Not efficient, but effective. And we said, well, if these patterns are correct, then it must be able for Jeff Sutherland, which is the guy with the white hair on the front, to use those patterns and create a sequence of patterns that he applied in his first ever Scrum team in '92 or whatever it was. And if he can't, well, maybe there's something wrong with the patterns, or maybe there's something wrong with him, but then we can discuss. Then we can discuss that. So, to introduce you to this, I want to do a little quiz, so you can get a little bit of taste for what the patterns are. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to post a question or a problem that one of these patterns solve. Then I will give you 3 options that you can choose from, 3 patterns, but then in very short, only in 2 lines. And I would like you to take 1 minute and discuss with the person next to you or behind you or with yourself, whatever you want, which option you think, which solution you think solves the problem. Is that okay? We'll do it in 1 minute and then we'll do the hand exercise you practiced in the morning. So let's do this, and then this will help us introduce sequences and languages. So, let's say the problem is we want the team to be reliable in its predictions. Let's say that is the problem. These guys are unreliable. We don't know when their shipping software actually works. It's pretty problematic if you're in software land. So let's take 3 minutes. Is the solution stable teams? So if that's the problem, then keep the teams stable and avoid shuffling people around between teams. Or is it swarming? Then the whole development team work together on one product backlog at a time. Or is it scrumming the scrum? Then resolve the most important impediment by putting one in the product backlog every sprint. So please take 1 minute. Should be fairly easy to find which solution solves the problem above. And it's okay to talk also. All right. So one of these solutions would be stable teams. So why? Well, why would we want to keep teams stable? One of the reasons is that then if you know that you're going to be stable, like say working for a year or more together with the same persons, you actually might care to invest time in getting to know them better and working on the relationships. Maybe chances are also higher that you might invest time in learning a different skill that's needed in your team. You even might care enough, because you're working for a long time with this team, to invest in improving the process which you use. And we know that from research on 279 or 379 development projects, that performance of teams usually follow this graph. You can see here that it takes a year and a half on average for a team to, if they become, to get up to speed. And then they remain for 3 years performing, and then, well, they're pretty bored. They get bored, they need new yogurt. It's like having the same breakfast every day. You need new breakfast, and then the teams, it's better that the teams start and over again and find some new challenges and some new people. So stable teams, if they are stable, if they know each other, then their results are more likely to be more stable, and that gives you more reliable teams. So one of the patterns. Oh, let's try one. There's two more. Then I'll start talking again. So how do you successfully pull backlog items into a sprint? Very simple problems. You're understanding now at what level patterns are. They're very small, fine-grained problems and solutions. So let's have a look at three solutions. So one is yesterday's weather. Then refer to the work done in the last sprint to forecast the work in the upcoming sprint. Or good housekeeping. Then fix all the bugs in less than a day. Aim to have some clean code at the end of the day. Or illegitimus non interruptus. Yeah, sorry for that. It's also a pattern. Then explicitly allot time for interrupts and time box unplanned work to that budget. So meaning there's a buffer. If there's interruptions coming up, well, you can handle those interruptions in that buffer until the buffer is full. So which pattern do you think fixes this problem? Let's take 60 seconds again. You found the solution? Or no? Ah, I thought you found it. Okie dokie. So this is a very fairly simple one. And of course, the result would be yesterday's weather, a very old one. It was from XP, late 90s actually. So if you did this amount of work last sprint and everything else stays the same, well, probably you can do the same amount of work next sprint. Very easy actually. I do want to point out that velocity is an evil thing. So it's not about increasing velocity, it's about being reliable, right? So it's very different than increasing velocity. We don't want to plan the teams to full capacity for a reason I will explain in a second. So let's do the last one, and then we can talk about the sequence of Jeff. So let's say we want the team to be effective and get stuff done. Maybe that's a problem, that your teams are not effective and don't get anything done. So what would be the solution? Illegitimus non interruptus, or good housekeeping, or swarming. Swarming is new, so then have the whole development team work together on one product backlog item at a time. So let's take 1 minute to reflect on this. All right. So the answer would be swarming, which is all obvious. But I hope you get a feeling now for what these 96 patterns are for. So if they provide you with the solution and why this is a solution, and now the problem is actually then implementing it, but that's what the keynote was about. That's a coaching problem that we don't address actually in the pattern book. But swarming is very popular. Probably you have heard of mob programming, which is just an implementation of swarming, where we work together as a team actually during a whole sprint or during a couple of days, everybody on the same item. So there are some more problems, like the legitimus non interruptus. So if people keep interrupting the team, well, then explicitly a lot of time to fix that. And in this particular example, this is just one team. A picture is maybe 10 years old. I took a long time ago. But the interesting thing is this is called the Blam team. And there are these orange things at the back, at the bottom. These are stickies. And they call them Blammies, because they're the Blam team. And these are just things that if somebody has a small interruption that we don't want to bother the product owner with, they can just walk down and glue it there, write a reference that you can find it in the mail, you can find it in some tool for more details, and then the team, whenever they feel comfortable, they just pick it up and work on it until the time box is done, and then they stop. And that way you can keep the team from being interrupted during the sprint. So what Jeff came up with is this sequence of patterns for building a team. And you can see on the left, the green ones, stable teams and yesterday's weather. These are two patterns that are preconditioned, because these will give you a stable process. Stable teams, and you plan only the stuff that you did last week or last sprint. So once you have those implemented, then what you're actually doing is you define the system, because this is a systemic approach, as being the Scrum team. That's the system, that's the whole. And now that we have that whole, we must improve the parts in the system, but never forgetting the purpose of the whole. So once we have that, the next step would be then, oops, it's okay, I hope. The next step would be to then go into the sprint and fix all the problems, impediments in the sprint. And that's what the four blue patterns are for. And we discussed swarming in legitimus non interruptus. This is about fixing impediments in the sprint. So now that we have some kind of stability, we're fixing impediments in the sprint. This would mean that we'll start finishing stuff early. If we do swarming, we get a lot of stuff done early, instead of a lot of stuff done, but nothing really done. You probably seen that before. And this gives us the opportunity to either add more stuff, the next sprint, so improve yesterday's weather, or improve on other things. And that's where the two patterns come in Scrumming the Scrum, which is about, well, find one thing that is bugging you the most and put that on your sprint backlog for the next sprint. That's Scrumming the Scrum. And happiness metric pattern is about, well, what should we then choose? And happiness metric says, well, you should choose the thing that excites the team the most. From all the list of improvements you can take the one that the teams are excited about. And then put that into your sprint backlog. So this is a sequence of patterns, and it's very strongly recommended to do them in this sequence. So where do these sequences come from? Well, they come from things called pattern languages. And I already told you, Scrum has two wholes, the value stream and the product organization. This is a complicated thing, you might think, and it looks very complicated. But these are the patterns that you need in order to build a Scrum product organization. And if you zoom in, this is a special feature I have, it's a zoom in feature. You will see here, for example, some of the patterns. And these relationships here, these mean, so if you look at Conway's law, this is the bigger system, and then these other patterns will refine that system. So for example, you see here daily Scrum and sprint planning. So it doesn't make sense to do daily Scrum if you haven't fixed sprint planning before? So what are you, it's pretty obvious, right? Or, well, my team is not autonomous, let's implement autonomous team. Well, it doesn't make sense if you don't have a cross-functional team. Because how can I be autonomous as a team if I have all these dependencies on skills, on functions that are outside my team? So if you focus on autonomous team, you're fixing the wrong problem if you haven't fixed cross-functional team. But maybe you shouldn't fix cross-functional team if you don't have a Scrum team. Yeah? But maybe you shouldn't fix Scrum team if the teams are organized, this is an organizational design pattern, in the wrong direction. Like, well, we have the Scrum team of Agile testers, we have the Scrum team of the marketing, we have the Scrum team of the Java folks. Then that's not a Scrum team, that's just a team that uses the word Scrum. You see, there's a difference here. So maybe you should tackle this one first. So the pattern language, this complicated graph, helps you in choosing what problem you should fix and in what order, right? And we have two of those, the value stream language and the product organization language. So a pattern doesn't give you the exact solution. It gives a example solution, but you still have to use your intelligence to implement it. But you can, because you understand the why. So there are a couple of sequences that we've seen all over the world work. So the product organization sequence, the value stream sequence, the team sequence we just discussed real quick. There's also a scaling sequence. And the scaling sequence is actually very short. So this is not about transformation. Transformation means, well, how can I clean up the mess that we created the last 20 years in our organization? That's other things. We can talk about it for the next 3 days, by the way. Starting Monday, how to do that. So that's about descaling. This is about scaling. So how do you go from nothing to a scaled organization? And these are the patterns that you can use for that strongly. You have a Scrum team, then you have get that Scrum team working, so you give them, they will ask more and more and more stuff, they will be faster and faster, understanding the customer better and better, so you can add market research, etc., customer problem validation, etc., to the teams. Then the teams might start to grow, then you have to split the teams, that would be mitosis, and one team becomes 2 teams. Then these teams need to coordinate, Scrum or Scrums, but this is not your Scrum or Scrums that you might have learned from Scrum class a long time ago. This is about creating the opportunities that the teams themselves know with whom they need to coordinate. This is not standing in a circle, all the Scrum Masters, and boring each other, telling each other what they don't want to hear. This is about having the teams do and organize and coordinate themselves. Then there's Meta Scrum, which is about solving the problem, what are the managers now going to do? They still need to be able to steer product. Then there's organizational sprint pulse. Well, maybe now that you have lots of teams, you want to work in one sprint. Then there's value areas. Maybe you are now in 20 teams. How can we keep the teams focused on the end customer? So we split along value areas, so that the teams can still develop, ship end-to-end customer features. And then when the product gets big and the markets start to differ in heartbeats and so on, we can actually split off sub-products, which is the pattern value stream fork. So this is all interesting, maybe. So what? How can we use it? Doesn't make sense, maybe. Maybe it's too theoretical. But it's not, I think. So how can you fix this? So one thing you can do is you go to the teams, or maybe you're already working with the teams, and you just observe what's going on. If you're an Agile coach or a Scrum Master, this is something you should do. Look for systemic issues, things that come up over and over again. 1, 2, 3, bingo. Probably, if it happens 3 times, it's systemic. So you make notes of that. And then you can analyze what's going on. Say, hey teams, did I see this correctly? Can you give me some feedback? Did I observe this correctly? If yes, you can do some more analysis and select some patterns that you think, well, might be interesting for them. And then when you get to the teams, I don't know, maybe during a retrospective or during any other session, you will say, well, these are all the patterns that I think might be applicable. These are what they are. Which ones do you like? Which ones do you connect with? Maybe they select 1, maybe select 2, maybe select 3. That's cool. And then you can use the language to see, well, I don't know, you're saying you want to fix autonomous teams. Well, you're not a cross-functional team yet. Maybe you should work on that first. So you can then, with them, create a sequence. You can even involve management if that's not too scary. And that would be a roadmap. Roadmap is not the right word, but a plan that you can work on with everybody involved to get your teams to the next level. So let's say they choose these 5 blue patterns. They say, wow, this is pretty cool. They're super excited. Then you can do the work with them. Well, maybe you should be thinking about these also, because it doesn't make sense to fix the lower ones if these ones are not addressed. Why? Well, in the pattern explains exactly why. So now you can fix up your rationale, have your plan, and then the problem becomes a coaching problem. How do you get people to move and work in this way? So it boils down to identifying your contexts, understanding which patterns can actually be applied in that context, and then from all the patterns that there are, because there are various alternatives, select the ones that you want to work on, and then see if the previous ones, the ones above that, are addressed or not. And if they are, perfect. If they're not, perfect also. Gives you very concrete steps to actually start working with your teams and with your organization. So, like Scrum, patterns are strong ideas. They're proven. There are various examples in all the patterns of companies who implemented it, at least 3. But still, you have to do all the IQ, brain-crunching work. But that's okay. That's why your company pays you to do that. So there's no problem there. And if you want final answers, which lots of customers ask me, well, Cesario, we want all the answers now. So I'm sorry, Scrum doesn't provide those, and patterns don't provide them also. They point you to the right direction. But it's very concrete. It's very specific. It's very small. Each small problem you can address. It's not, well, we have to adopt Agile. We have to flip half of the organization, which we recommend, for example, in less. This helps you do it a small step at a time. So that's it. You can buy the book if you want, but you can also just not buy the book and go to this website. And you can find all the patterns and all the pattern languages and all the glue chapters on this website and try it out if it works for you or not. I would be curious to hear some stories from Ukraine about pattern usage. All right. Any questions or doubts or clarifications that we need? Good. It's clear? All right.